Welcome, my friends, to Peace, Love, and Bring It Back, the podcast that never ends, where we gather our clan and talk about the peace and love in our lives, the difficulties along the journey, and how we rise up from them. We will experience a little thing I call Kluberty together, and by the end of the show, we're going to find our sweet spot. I'm Uncle Dave, and our transformation starts right here. Hey now, and how are you doing? Just want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today's episode, I met this guest, and she is amazing. Sat down, and we lost track of time in our conversation when I was in LA at a speaking competition. So, love to bring on Dr. Simi. Dr. Simi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and thanks for that beautiful introduction. It's very sweet of you.
Yeah, no, we lost track of time. We started talking. She was a speaker right before me, and so I wanted to be respectful, tried to listen to her speech, and I was like, wow, it's exactly things that we've heard on this show, things that I preach, and like, yeah, let's have a conversation afterwards, which it didn't happen immediately afterwards, but we kept on bumping into each other, and then we finally made the time and lost about 2 hours or so. I don't remember how long it was, but it was a while, and it was definitely worthwhile, and I want the audience to experience that as well.
Yes, we got lost in the conversation. It was beautiful. It was as if we were bending some time-space reality, so it was pretty cool.
So, how are you doing? So, how are you doing today? So, it's been about a week. How has the flavor, the aftershock of the conference resonated with you?
Yeah, I believe it's a mixture of things. On one hand, I'm really owning myself, owning who I am, feeling more empowered actually after speaking, because I hadn't spoken in quite some time. So the conference really gave me a voice that I really appreciate, and I'm noticing how that's a domino effect on how there are lots of other things that are transpiring within me and without me, and I mean outside of me rather. And for those, I just wanted to be clear on what I was saying there. And so the other part is that I was a little, I can say, disenchanted by LA. I'm not there to sell myself. I'm impact driven. I'm not money driven, and I want to help people. So these talks of money, especially people who are really pushy, I guess, for lack of a better word, and wanting to sell their product and get you enrolled in this and that or the other. I feel like that really pulls on my energy to where I can't contain it within myself. And when I do that, I notice that my own health deteriorates. I get tired. I don't have the financial abundance. And so it's really paying attention to those little things, because I am all about health, right? I'm a medical doctor by training, and I've discovered certain secrets and mysteries to our health that really aren't secrets and mysteries. It was just secrets and mysteries to me, so to speak. So I'm really excited to be in this space where I'm like, okay, I know what I want, and it's just helped to bring more clarity as to what it is where my focus should be moving forward.
Well, and that was one of the things that resonated with me when I was watching you, is that you and I have very similar, looks on life, and it's more important to assist other people than to, make sure that we get our money first. And, that was, really where the conversations started going with you and I. But let's take a step back before we dive too much. How'd you get here? You said you were okay, but I'd love to hear part of who you are and how you got here, so the audience can understand the specialness of who you are.
Thank you. I guess I'll start from the beginning a little bit and kind of dive into where I'm at. So I was, as you heard during my talk, that I was pretty severely abused as a child, starting at the ages of 6 months and lasting until I was 12 years old. The abuse was intense. It was physical. It was sexual, including animals and genital procedure. And in all honesty, I would not trade a thing, because it has empowered me in so many different ways. So I went in search of God within me because being brought up in India, I was taught at an early age that God is within you. And here I was 38 years old and I'm going, I still don't know where that God is, you know?
Mhm.
So I wanted to go in search of that. And I found some beautiful spiritual mentors. One of them was the 12 archangels themselves. They've been guiding my path ever since. And they taught me the art of looking within. And the more I look within, the more reflection I get of who I am. And you know, so, some of that stuff is really, really difficult to look at, you know.
Mhm.
This is how I'm treating someone and as a result causing trauma in my unconsciousness, right? So yes, while there's some good stuff on the inner, all the powers that I have, but then there's also the shadow aspect. Okay, this is what I'm doing that's causing harm to another. So it's really taking that honest look, and that has led me to really claiming my gifts, which are many, is what I'm realizing, and that realization is deepening this week as to what my own gifts are, and how I can contribute to the consciousness of humanity moving forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. But it really is, starting out within ourselves. Once we can see the past, that things that might have happened to us, or the experiences we live through, but also how we do it ourselves, how we live. And you had mentioned something about how you see yourself unintentionally, maybe doing something that now you wouldn't make those same choices.
Yes, I wouldn't make those same choices now. And it's interesting because once you become aware of your own pattern, of your unconscious pattern that's harming another, the impetus behind your habits, your pattern, it goes away. So then you just have to be conscious of not doing it. And that's actually a lot easier once you've discovered what the force was that was causing you to act the way you did. And the force is always, and it's no big secret, the force is always a sense of unworthiness or lack of confidence, or whatever that not enoughness is what's driving the patterns. And
Yep.
once we kind of look at that and soothe ourselves and love that little one, then it becomes a habit. And then when you pay attention to the habit, you're like, oh, I can simply choose to do it this way versus this way. It becomes that easy, really.
Yeah, it really becomes easier once you start practicing it. I mean, that's why when I on some of my talks, I talk about Ho'oponopono, where we heal ourselves, and it's really healing our inner child.
Yes, that's exactly what we're healing. And even when we are, say, forgiving another, we're really forgiving ourselves. But if
Yeah.
it makes you feel better in the moment to forgive another, please do so.
Right.
You
That's
know?
part of that forgiving ourselves, because it's healing somebody else as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we are all one.
Well,
You
that's
are
the whole
just a
part,
part of
right?
me.
That's the trick, is once we really acknowledge that we're all one. We might be different physical beings, but energy beings, we're all one.
That's right. So whether I'm forgiving you or or myself, it's all one and the same.
So, so along your journey, you obviously started off. You just explained very traumatic, and I guess it's great that at 38 you found it. I didn't find it till even later in life, so it's a challenge. But but you were going through, and you mentioned, so obviously you not only had worked through your challenges, the traumas that were put upon you as a child, but you also became a doctor. So you became knowledgeable in what we'll call Western philosophy, also, or Western healing.
Yeah, that was a journey in and of itself. I had two kids during med school. My older one was a year and a half when I started, and my younger one was born when I was in my first year of residency. So it was, raising two kids, and I was married and taking 40 hours of call during that time, because the laws that state you can't take, so many hours of call, like you can't, you can't continue to go
Yep.
on. those laws didn't come into effect until later on. And so I remember waking up one morning, going at 3 a.m, even though we were told, don't come before 5 o'clock. I'm like, well, how do you want me to see all 20 patients before 8 o'clock for our meeting if I can't come in any earlier than 5? So I would sneak in. I wouldn't tell anyone. I'm like, I got to see these patients. And, because I feel like it was a tougher journey for me to soak in all the information about the patients and learn all that I needed to learn, all the drug interactions and all the past medical history. It really took me time because I feel like I had certain amounts of learning disability that wasn't caught. And once I got it, though, I would get it, but it would take me time. I was slow at initially getting the learning process down. And that's okay, and I made it work. And so I remember going in at 3 a.m, and it wasn't until the following evening, so that day and then the next day, like at 6 o'clock, that I got home, to a point where my younger daughter, I believe she was around 1.5, 2 months old, and she forgot who I was, because I was gone for so long.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was, but it just shows that where there's a will, there's a way. All you have to do is be willing to do it. That's all that's required. As Jesus said in Course of Miracles, he says that all that is required is a little bit of your willingness.
Yeah, well, that's part of it is, right, just showing up and be willing to learn, admit your mistakes, as you mentioned earlier, but also learn from them. Not only just say, okay, I did something wrong, but learning from them and then growing through them, as you started saying as well. Now,
and when I was going to med school, I wasn't aware of most of my trauma. I was aware of some of it. I was aware of my sexual abuse that there was another set of abuse that started when I was 6 years old. So from the point of 6 months to 6 years, that of sexual abuse, I wasn't aware of. Those memories only surfaced I'd say about 9 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously those must have been traumatic, but coming back and being stuck in that early childhood, definitely 6 months, but even 6 years old, getting stuck in those ways, that must have been. So how did you overcome some of this? Knowing the blending, I guess this is when you started using the blending of the Western medicine and the Eastern medicine and thinking about things outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, I would say the process actually found me. So in 2012, I came across a group of 12 archangels who called themselves Theo, and they were channeled by a lady who lives she used to live in LA. I don't know where she is now. And when I found them, they talked about doing the inner work and finding that inner child. And honestly, I had no idea. All I knew was that they knew how to help me. It was simply that simple. It wasn't me doing my extensive research and saying, oh, this is what they do or don't do. It was none of that. It was simply me trusting my heart, which was saying, this is where you can find help, because my life was a mess. It was a royal mess. And I knew it was something higher than me that could help me. There was, nothing else could help me. And I knew that somehow. So I started taking classes with Theo, and they taught us how to tune into that inner child. And what I'm finding is that inner child work, it's so rich with wisdom. It is so rich with knowledge. And a lot of people I've seen out there, and this is where I'm seeing them stuck, is that they say, oh yeah, inner child work, I've been there, done that. And I'm like, clearly, if you're saying that, you haven't been there and you haven't done that. Because this process will lead you to your enlightenment if you allow it, if you continue to marinate yourself in it. And it became a part of life for me. It was a lifestyle. I ate and I breathed and I drank this stuff. That's how I lived.
Right. That's where a lot of people, go, I did it. I've done some of it, but it's really scary stuff, because especially when you have as much trauma. I mean, the things I needed to go through, and I don't know that I've gone through it all, because, I keep diving and I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't realize. You don't realize it. And it sometimes just pops up out of nowhere.
Right. And one of the things I came across was narcissism in myself. And I was also led to then see the the deep insecurity that lies in my soul that led me to be narcissistic. So it helped me to have compassion for myself,
Mm.
you know? And it's like when you are this severely abused, excuse me, but how do you not become an asshole?
Well, some of it becomes protection, right? It's well, people have always done this. Our brain summarizes exactly behaviors, or it picks up behaviors, and they summarize it. And you really just do it. You don't realize it until you're told. That's why communication is so important. And when you're able to find people that you're able to communicate with, or to tell you, hey, Dave, you're an asshole. Let's go. Did you notice you were doing this? And then it's a choice. If you come over to me and say, Dave, this is how I saw you doing it, or this is how I felt when you spoke to me this way. And then I could go, oh, that's not what I meant, and correct that. Or you could just be like, if you don't have that communication, you're just like, oh, he's an asshole. The way he does things. And, that happens fewer and fewer. I have to say I own that earlier in my life than I do now.
But I'll be totally honest here. I meant it. Whatever I was doing, because I felt so insecure that I was an asshole. There wasn't a miscommunication. So I'm totally owning that part. And I'm also saying that when I began to have compassion for myself is when I began to heal that part of me.
Sure.
And that's where the tricky part is. Like, you have to be willing. And even though I was willing, it was still a very difficult process for me to own that stuff initially, because the ego was so fragile that I could not take criticism. So it took a loving, kind act from my daughter, who sat me down for 2 hours after we had got off the plane from Costa Rica, and we grabbed our luggage, and she just went ham on me. She schooled me, and I'm like, wait, this is not a good time. It's never a good time, Mom. She goes, I said, but do you understand? We're standing in the middle of this baggage claim area, and we're right in the middle of the hallway. So this is not a good time, like, as far as space. She's like, well, let's just move to the side. So she sat us down to the side, and we sat there from like 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. until she told me everything that I was doing that was hurting her. She pointed out my patterning to me. And then what I began to realize, it's this pattern that actually we make ourselves sick, because when we behave in a certain way, we get mad at ourselves. And then we carry that guilt around us, which is what leads to a lot of our physical illnesses.
Yep.
And this is why, the research has shown that a child who has experienced one ACE, which is an adverse childhood event, is at a higher risk for having cancer as an adult than a child who hasn't.
Yeah, no, I've seen the research about people holding it down, and holding it in. The energy goes somewhere, and it needs to kind of formulate in a lot of different ways. That's why it's really important to know how your body feels with certain things. I know when I get too stressed, my neck starts bothering me, and I need to then do things. Even just this past week, so I hadn't seen my acupuncturist in about 2 weeks, and when I went there, they were putting in pins, and I was like, "Oh, ow, ow!" And and she goes, "Yeah, you haven't been here in a while." The energy, it was, and I had told her I felt a little off, and she was like, "Yeah, you just have all this energy. It was good energy, but it just wasn't flowing in the right way." And that's what we do. What are some ways that you use to align your energy, or to help move your energy in a healthy way?
So physical activity is really important, which I didn't realize until recently how much it was helping me. I've always done it. I love to exercise, and I'm realizing that it moves that energy. So that's really number one. Number two is my favorite way, and I've been doing it since 2012, for 11 years now, is the inner child work. It's tapping into that inner child, because what happens is when we experience trauma, part of our soul gets fragmented. And those fragments develop a sense of abandonment. They want to be heard. And in their desire to be heard, they have temper tantrums inside of you. And one of the ways that temper tantrum is manifested is through a physical illness. So simply, when you have a physical illness, if you tune into that inner child who's causing those physical symptoms, your symptoms will go away. It is as simple as that. So that's the second one. So first one, exercise. Second one is inner child. Third one is just simply meditating. Maybe, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes a day or twice a day.
Mm.
And that's simply watching my breath. I'm not a big believer in guided meditations. I've never done them. And I mean, I'm not saying there isn't benefit. It's just speaking of myself.
Yeah.
And when you can quieten that mind, it'll allow you to tune into that inner child, because we, on the average, have about 4 to 6 inner children, and they each have a certain vibration to them. So based on what your emotions are, you can fine tune that into, oh, it's my 6-year-old. Oh, it's my 6-month-old. Oh, it's my 20-year-old. So you can really, if you are perceptive enough, if you give it enough time, you can hone into which inner child it is that is wanting your attention in a given moment.
That's awesome, and that's right. We get stuck in so many different ways as we're growing up, or different periods. I hadn't realized that until I did some inner work as well, and it's so brave. How do you, when you're working with somebody, how do you help them through their work to get through? Because a lot of people, once you start talking about inner child and past challenges, people will start getting very defensive.
Right. And so my first session is called the discovery session, in which I gather some information and then I lay down some foundational principles, meaning you will get triggered and it's okay. You will probably get mad at me at some point in time, because I'm wanting to point something out in you that's within you. And that's what you're paying me for. That's what I'm holding space for you. Right. And what happens is, because I've done the inner work, the energy gets so uplifted that then you are able to actually see what's within you a lot more clearly than if I hadn't done my work. So that is a blessing that comes forward. All the beings, the light beings, they do come forward and assist with that process. And it makes it easier for you to see, oh yeah, I am doing that. So what I do is I start asking a series of questions where they get to the answers themselves, rather than me saying, oh, you're doing this. But sometimes I am being guided. I am being guided to share, okay, this is what you're doing. And other times I just ask questions so that you can arrive at that conclusion rather than me telling it to you.
That's awesome. Yeah, because it really is, because it's most important, I would say, probably for them to come up to or the person to come up with their own ideas, and because nobody ever wants to, and that's why I like using the word mentor versus coach, because you let them come to their own conclusions.
Yes. Yeah, and oftentimes we'll start out, like, well, I would say, this is what I'm seeing, and they will sit there and they will deny it, and sure enough, an hour later, as we're doing the questioning, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, you did say that about an hour ago. I did. And that's okay, because we had set the stage, we had kind of planted the seed, so you could extract it from within you and see, okay, this is what I'm doing. Because it doesn't serve me to know what's going on within you unless you know what's going on within you. Right.
Right. Yeah. And that's the biggest, I guess I keep saying the biggest, but there's so many challenges when you're working through is because the really comes, the teacher will appear when the student is ready. And,
yes.
It's scary work to do that type of work, to go in looking at yourself, starting with that part about what can I do, or what am I feeling? And generally it's a feeling of unease by remembering some of those memories.
Yes, it can be a daunting process. And this is where one of my favorite quotes is, may there be compassion in your gaze when you look within.
Nice. That's really nice. So you've been doing this for a while, but how has it changed your life? I mean, I could, for those who are just listening to audio, hopefully they'll look at the video to see how much you're glowing. Really, when you get through all that trauma, do you go through a physical change to, because we're holding it within our body, we're holding that other and not useful energy in our body?
That's a great question. Yes. So what I've noticed is that I used to have this, as we women call it, resting bitch face, right? RBF. I used to have this angry look, and especially it was around my eyes. And then one day, as I was going through the process, a friend of mine had pointed something out to me. And when I began to look at that, I went in the mirror and I said, I went and looked in the mirror and I said, wow, because my features had softened within minutes of addressing whatever it was that was causing me to look angry all the time.
Mm.
And in other ways too, right? As the body releases anger. I mean, I'm 53 now, and somebody like me, I was getting thoughts about 15 years ago now, that, what would it be like if I had cancer? Oh, I think I can fight it. I don't know. So when I began to have those thoughts, I'm like, oh, shoot, I think I'm going to get cancer because of how I was thinking. It was almost like I wanted it to happen. I wanted to punish myself for not being good enough, for not having loving parents, or whatever it was, that the story that I was making up. And I am healthy. I'm 53. I'm not on any medications. Anything that I come across in my health, I'm able to tune into that inner child and really come back into a place of ease from a place of dis-ease. And that's just, like I said, it's become a way of life for me now.
Well, you're more in tune also how the energy feels within you. Like I said about my shoulders, what would be one way that you would suggest to somebody to look into or recognize some of the dis-ease in their body, so that way they can move it forward into a better way?
Yeah. What the technique I use is, so every time we have a disease or an illness in our body, it's associated with an emotion. Okay. So say you have knee pain, you feel into what emotion that knee pain is causing you. Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it jealousy? Is it grievance? Whatever that is, then you go back and you soothe the child who's feeling that way. And you'll notice that if you dedicate enough time, the child will begin to feel better, And for some, it may be longer than others, depending on how deep the issue is. But it is simple. It is that simple.
Yeah,
I've worked in urgent care, and I've seen like blood pressures go from like 260 over 170 to 140 over 70 within half an hour of me addressing their issues. But you also have to know, I've been doing this for 11 years. I eat, live, and breathe this stuff, right? So I know it like the back of my hand. I feel like I am the embodiment of the process. So I can really tune in very, very quickly as to what the emotional issue is. And you will get good at it too as you continue to work on it and if you dedicate time to it.
Right. So everybody could do that themselves. And I think that's what Dr. Simi is really telling us, that we need to work through our problems, but also really face them to ourselves. Not hide, because at the end of the day, and that's one of the things I teach as well, is I don't care what your problem, I care for your well-being, but it doesn't matter what your problem is. You know what your problem is. So would you agree that they don't need to share the problem with them as long as they can recognize that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. They can work on it within themselves. And also when you begin to soothe this inner child, what will happen is you will be guided to take inspired action.
Mm.
And it's an inspired action. It's not a forced action. It's not coming from the mind. It's coming from the heart. So when you act on that inspired action, that's when your life begins to shift. I have very little drama in my life. I am so happy with where I'm at, both not just my physical body, but my physical reality, right? And Spirit is using me in so many different ways as well. And we can talk about that another time if you'd like. But yeah, then Spirit begins to use you so you can be of service to Spirit.
Right. And that's really what it comes down to also, is that it's not only having this inner peace, it's what you're going to do with it. And that's why it's that law of abundance, right? The law of attraction and the law of abundance as well, because the better you're feeling, the greater opportunities that you're going to have to feel good, and it keeps leveling you up. That's one of the things I talk about, is how we can keep leveling up. It's not only about overcoming the traumas that we might have had in our past, but it's keep leveling up, growing, and experiencing life in a completely different way.
Right. Well said.
Now, is there any... So if I have an ailment, I should always just look into I mean, obviously there is still a part of go to your doctor and make sure that your blood pressure and things like that. But you could, if you're attuned, would you say that if you're attuned to your body, you could heal it much quicker than traditional medicine?
Oh, hands down. So yes, I will say that there is a time and a place for everything, right? So yes, please, you need to go to that doctor. You need to get that, an illness taken care of, because you don't know the process yet. You have to learn it first. And then as you learn it, you learn to elevate your vibrational frequency. When you elevate it, that's when your health comes into a place of ease. So yes, they have to go to the doctor and then tune in. That's the key.
And you got to do it consistently, right? It's not just a one-time process.
You have to be unrelenting for your health. I mean, you have to fight for your health. You have to be vigilant, right? Isn't that why Jesus said, "Be vigilant only for the kingdom of God"? I think that's what he was meaning.
That's amazing because it's beautiful. It really is where we all the higher we take it really takes us to that level of oneness. Now, you said you had communications with the archangels, and now you're able to do that because you've kind of cleared all obstacles between you and the universe.
I have actually, and that's a beautiful feeling. What I'm realizing is I started out with myself and I went on this journey, and guess what? I'm back to myself and just owning it and realizing why my no. And I was speaking with a friend earlier today, and I was sharing with her that now I know when I say no, why it's a no. It's not just a belief in my head. It's the realization of who I am. So it's coming from a place of empowerment rather than fear when I say no. Because sometimes people say no because they're afraid or whatnot, right? Well, I'm saying no because I have the clarity and I'm empowered, and I'm saying no, thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah. No is a complete sentence, and really understanding why we have the no. It's rather than just saying is no out of fear. Because what would you say if somebody had a no out of fear? What's a suggestion that you might suggest?
Honestly, your no's are going to be out of fear until you're done doing your work, until you realize that power that lies within you. So again, having compassion, right? Oh, I said that no out of fear. Okay. Just recognizing that, just being aware of it and continuing to do your work. And one day, I guarantee you will get to that place where you're going to say no, and it's going to come from a place of empowerment. And then people will take it as that. They're not going to come after you and say, "Oh, are you sure?" Right? There's going to be none of that. There's going to be like, "Oh, she doesn't want it. All right, be done."
Right. It's setting really those boundaries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you now set boundaries? So, where we've taken the journey, obviously at the beginning you were working through trauma, and now when you say no, you understand a lot better than you might have said it years ago. What would you suggest as people to set boundaries and how to build those boundaries?
I would say do the inner child work, because then the inspiration will come from within you. But until you can do that, it can be in little things. For instance, we were at the conference, and when there was a speaker was going on stage, one of his secretaries or whatever, they came over with these plastic cards and they said, "Oh, here's a card. Why don't you take this? And the speaker, you can take notes or write down your questions for the speaker." And I wasn't even planning on going because I had my talk to go to. So instead of grabbing that piece of paper simply because she was handing it to me, I said, "You know what? No, thank you. I'm not going to be able to go to this person's talk. And number one, I have my own talk. Number two, I'm really not interested in the subject that he's talking about, right? It's not serving me. I mean, he can talk to people who it is serving, sure, right? So me showing up and I'm not taking the information is not serving anyone. And number two, I said, it's cluttering the earth, and I don't want to clutter the earth. So will you please keep this and give it to somebody who can use it?" So it's little things like that. It's expressing, it's your voice. It's saying no for a right reason, right? Not for the sake of saying no because you want to control someone, but truly saying no because that's what is resonating in your beingness.
Yep. No, that's exactly. And your talk, the talk that I heard was about redesigning your DNA. And we've sort of spoken a lot about this, but I'd like you to have an opportunity to kind of explain what that means and how to go about doing it in a short amount of time.
Hmm. So what I've come to find out in my journey is that your emotional body forms the blueprint for your physical body. So you cannot shift your physical body unless you have a new blueprint. And the blueprint is shift when the emotions shift, it shifts the DNA that because the blueprint is the DNA. So DNA is shifted when we release the emotions, anger, blame, shame, the emotions that are not in alignment with who we are as a being, as a powerful being, as a God being, as a master. And when we begin to release those emotions, the DNA just takes care of itself. It heals. It transforms. So this is why there's so much research on epigenetics, which has shown that just because you inherit a gene of, say, that colon cancer, of the breast cancer, it doesn't mean the gene has to be expressed. Because when you shift that emotion, the gene heals, the mutation heals, and the physical body then heals as well. So that's what I say, redesigning your DNA.
That's beautiful. I've been really the thoughts that we can, not that we thoughts that we can, the thoughts that we do change our body, and we can heal ourselves over time. And that epigenetics is one of those things that I enjoy reading about, because when you start looking at the patterns in our lives, and the patterns in our lives are formulated by those who are around us, and the thoughts that how we interpret it, it becomes really powerful. And you see where some of the fears that we have are unintentionally, sometimes it's like that unconscious bias that we have just because we're around those type of mindsets. And the same thing with our body, how it starts triggering it if we've had fearful, or our parents or relatives have had some painful experiences that we might not have experienced, but they pass down unintentionally towards us.
Yeah. You know what, I will say that fear is actually one of the hardest emotions or hardest feeling to deal with. At least it has been for me. There are times when I just wanted to crawl out of my skin, but I'm like, where do I go? Like, I'm in here in my body. So where am I going to go if I want to crawl out? And what I'm realizing is that anger that we hold actually serves as a shell that keeps the fear in place. So when we release the anger, everything underneath, because there can be shame underneath of anger, there can be fear and guilt, everything else dissolves. It is so fascinating to me. I let go of anger, my fear dissolves. Then that gives me the courage to say that no and set that boundary.
Sure. That's powerful. Yeah, no,
yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it all is the right way. But how would you work with somebody who on forgiveness? So somebody who wronged you, you can forgive with the things within yourself to allow that. But how would you be open to, or are you open to be, receiving forgiveness from somebody else?
It's all about forgiveness, right? Everything. So the way I handle forgiveness is not a conscious process. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to forgive so-and-so and think you're going to be done. No.
Yeah, no. It's like that when you were a kid, right? When you were a kid, did you hit your sister? Yes. Say sorry, which doesn't make anything any better. And, even if your sister or brother or, accepts it, it's not really forgiveness, right? We hold that energy within ourselves.
Yes, exactly. So it's not as conscious as we'd like it to be. And again, first you have to feel the anger that you're holding. That is unforgiveness. So unforgiveness is the anger. So say your brother hit you, and so you want to now forgive them. So you feel the anger. So what I do, I actually have a pirate's mount when it comes to forgiveness. I say, I use all the cuss words, and guess what? It's something that is uncensored and non-negotiable. Meaning, if you're feeling, say, this guy's an asshole, that's in your energy field anyways. So you might as well admit it to yourself that that's what you're feeling. It's getting out of the denial of your feelings.
Mm.
So it's constant continuing to feel that emotion. Okay, I think he's an asshole. I think he's whatever word you want to use, and feel that to the fullest and not hold on to it. And see that that's a technique. That's a technique that I mean, if people want to learn more, I'm happy to share how to release, because a lot of the times people feel it, but they hold on to it. So
Right.
how do we know we're releasing it, not holding on to it? So if it's becoming intense, the anger within you, that means you're holding on to it, because it shouldn't be that. I mean, yes, there is some intensity. Don't get me wrong. There is uncomfortability, but it shouldn't be so intense to a point where you're like, I'm going to break, or I'm going to hit someone or whatever. It is uncomfortable, and there's ways of releasing it. And once you release that anger, that compassion, that forgiveness truly comes from within you. And you'll notice in little things, that you've forgiven, because all of a sudden you when you think about that person, you don't have the anger. Or it can be as simple as you're eating and you're not eating so angrily, right? That's
Yeah.
also forgiveness. Or you're driving and you're more mindful. You're not wanting to like run through every yellow light. It's okay to stop and breathe. Those are all processes that you'll find are part of unforgiveness.
No, exactly. And that's why for the audience, think about it. When you've done something, when you built up an emotion or a fear, and then you've actually then done something to overcome that fear, what does it feel like? It feels released, right? There's that release, the euphoria, and it really becomes so powerful within yourself, because then you've accomplished something. I mean, even like this morning, I had to drop off some paperwork where I was feeling a lot of angst around it, and I could have, when I was driving to go do it, I was already on my errands, and I was like, well, I can go do this later, and then I was like, no, you got to do it now. Not for any reason, not because it was. Do it now, and why are you going to hold on to the energy? No matter what energy I felt before, I still might feel afterwards, but the fact that I was able to release the worry about it was one less thing I needed to do, and because you're going to feel the energy anyway. So
Exactly.
try to face the things that need to be faced.
Right. Because that's where health is. And to me, health is not just physical. Health is financial, health is relational, health is physical, health is, your relationship with your food. So it's everything, right? And so what is your relationship like with your food? What is your relationship like with your finances? What is your relationship like with yourself? Because that's where true health is.
Mm.
It's not just, oh, I'm feeling good physically or whatever. It's much, much, much more than that.
Yeah, there's so many layers, and one of the stories I tell is when we say you got to be honest with yourself, write it down. I really suggest to people, write down their raw emotions. Use whatever language you want. Where you said you talk like a pirate and things like that. But really write it down. Nobody has to see it. That's the power. You have the power. I had done that one time and went through a bunch of traumatic events, and it was like 35 pages. And then I went into my backyard, and on the fire pit, I burnt it, and I put the cover so it doesn't blow all over. But I watched it release, and I felt so much better. So there's so many different ways, and you just need to do, if you're going to do something like that, please do something carefully, and always, whatever you're doing, release it in a healthy way. Would you agree, or what happens when you're angry and you want to write an email to somebody? Would you say put as much love into that email, the energy behind it, not necessarily the words, not saying tell them that you love them even though you're not, but if you're putting it in there with a mindset of, I really hope that the outcome that we want is obtained. That's sort of that energy shift.
Right. And as I alluded to earlier, and you've been speaking to that as well, that the energy it's in your energy field, right? So even if you're writing, I mean, how often, this is what my teacher said when I first started on the spiritual journey. She said, how often do you think badly of someone, or you're angry with someone, and they come up out of the blue and they give you a big fat hug and they say, oh, I love you, and truly mean it? They don't, because they sense that within you as well, right? So one of the ways that, I mean, obviously there's several different ways that we release anger, but one of the ways that I've done it, because I felt so angry at obviously my, at the abuse and all that's transpired, is that I would freeze water in like Ziploc bags. So I had blocks, kind of like bricks to throw. And then this was in Wisconsin, so it's not as busy as Colorado is here. So I don't know where I would do that here, but there were parks and they were totally empty at night. And so I would go and just scream as I'm like slamming down these blocks of ice because I needed a release. So I get it. There are times when you need that kind of a release, right? But you have to be careful with that kind of a release because it can actually throw you into a cycle of rage. So really, it's really good to have a mentor. And this is where we started out, right? Somebody who can guide you and just bring you out initially, because then you begin to carry your own energy and the information will come from within you as to what to do and what not to do. But at least in the very beginning of your journey, get help, I mean, Theo was my mentor, the 12 archangels. They helped me. They guided my path, There's nothing wrong with that, because a lot of us, at least I was, when because I was abused, I didn't believe in therapy, or I didn't, because as if it made me somehow bad or whatnot. And it's also cultural for us, I'm from India. So we don't talk about things like, no, so therapy was like out of the question, because that means there was something really wrong with me if I wanted to get therapy. So I think that was my way of just seeking out the archangels so that it would be permissible to my mind to get help, if that makes sense.
Sure, no,
I had not gotten any help even through med school and raising kids, and and I wish I had now, but I didn't have the wherewithal to even think like that, So that's why I'm saying it's okay to get help. We don't have to be mavericks, and we'll still get there to wherever we're wanting to get to. So yes, there's no destination, but guess what? There are milestones along the way.
Right. And we need to always remember those milestones, celebrate those milestones.
Yes.
And that's one of the most important things. So we're getting towards a milestone on this episode as we're getting close to the end. How can people contact you and connect with you?
I have a website. It's drsimissays.com. So drsimissays.com. And fill out a contact form, and I'll be happy to get in touch with you. Also, I'm looking for bigger stages. If there's anybody out there, I would love to come and speak, and that would and spread the word to the masses. Because our healthcare is in shambles, and being a medical doctor, I feel like it's almost my duty to help others to see that there are other avenues to regain their health. So thank you.
That's awesome, and thank you so much for your time and the knowledge, and we could talk some more, but this episode, we're getting close to the end, and for everybody else, make sure that you find that peace and love within yourself, because that's where it all starts. And when you're bringing a bat, just make sure that you do what you can to make sure it's finding your sweet spot, and again, moving that energy in the right way that we've talked about today. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you, David.
I'm really glad that you're enjoying our show. Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat is brought to you by Launchpad 516 Studios. Executive produced by David Chemetsky and George Andriopoulos. Music selections by James Grant, Zach Nelson, and James Gaither, and licensed through Storyblock. Sound effects and sponsorship music licensed through Epidemic Sound. Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat is hosted with Podbean. Subscribe to our show wherever podcasts are available. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and share with all of your friends. Follow us on Facebook at Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Follow me, Uncle Dave Chemetsky, on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Clubhouse. You can find all those links and more info at davidchemetsky.com. For show ideas, feedback, guest inquiries, or just a chat, reach out to me at peacelovebringabat@gmail.com. For sponsorship and media inquiries, reach out to peacelovebringabat@lp516.com. Make sure to follow all the great podcasts produced by Launchpad 516 Studios. Today's journey has come to a close, my friends. I hope the seeds of peace and love continue to grow for each one of you. Remember that peace and love surrounds you and will assist you to rise again. But don't forget to bring it back for what you believe in. Namaste.